All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Safeoclock Health and Safety Interactive Workshop. It's quite a pleasure to have all of us here after the long week. So it's my pleasure to have us. And as our culture has been, we'll begin with a brief presentation. After the presentation, we share our personal experience, add to our knowledge, and we learn from each other, ask questions, and answer ourselves. So we are the teacher and we are the student for ourselves. So it's a pleasure to have us. Today, we'll be discussing workplace hearing conservation program. So we look into, we'll start with some of the definitions, what is expected, and we'll go into hearing mechanism. I will talk briefly about noise-induced hearing damage, noise intensity, noise frequency, noise exposure. Then I will talk more about hearing conservation programs, noise reduction, and noise reduction rate in NRR. So we'll talk a bit about earmuffs and earplugs. I will also do some conclusion with best approach in hearing protection. So let's begin. This presentation will take me approximately 10 minutes to 15 minutes. So what exactly is hearing conservation program? So this is a program that strives to prevent initial occupational hearing loss. So to prevent it initially, to protect and preserve remaining hearing. So in case the prevention didn't work and something has happened, so we have to protect the remaining hearing. And this program also aims to equip workers with knowledge and hearing protection devices, which is necessary to safeguard them from a noise-induced hearing loss. So this is majorly what is hearing conservation program. Now, for every incident in the workplace, there is always a impact. So according to National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, it says that about 3 million workers are exposed to hazardous noise in the USA. And in general, over 10 million workers have suffered a permanent hearing loss, with induced hearing loss being a second most reported occupational injury. So this is the background. About 10 million workers have suffered from permanent hearing loss, and there is continuous reporting, second most reported occupational injury in the US. So that is hearing loss or hearing-induced damage or noise-induced damage. So we'll be looking at let's look at the mechanism for hearing. How does hearing come about? First, the sound waves enters through our ear canal, and this sound wave entering the ear canal will cause a vibration in the eardrum. So when this vibration in the eardrum occurs, it will stimulate three dots inside this eardrum, known as the hammer, the stirrup, and the anvil. So when this vibration stimulates this dot, what happens then? The movement, the vibration gets moved into the eardrum, from the eardrum to the inner ear. And the inner ear, which is filled with fluids and houses membranes that contains thousands of hair-like wave endings. So inside the eardrum, you have the fluid known as a cilia. So this cilia translates the movement of the hammer and the stirrup and anvil into nerve impulses, and that is carried to the brain and then is converted to sound so that you'll be able to understand what you have heard and it becomes a sound. So this is just the brief about the mechanism of hearing. And then when it becomes excess, when there is constant exposure to high noise level, there will be a damage to the cilia. Of course, we know that the cilia is very fragile. So this cilia also cannot be repaired. It doesn't regenerate. So it becomes a permanent damage, and this can lead to incurable hearing loss. Now, one of the symptoms to identify a temporary hearing loss is ringing in the ears, and this is called tinnitus. So when there is continuous ringing in the ears, it can last for a few minutes, can also last for hours. So this is an earlier symptom of possible hearing loss that the person could face. Let's look at noise intensity. Noise intensity simply means the loudness of that sound, and it's measured in decibels. So when you hear a sound, or when you hear a noise, so how sound it is what we refer to as noise intensity. And under OSHA, we must have ear protection at a particular level of this noise intensity, and that is what is referred to as action level. So at the action level, there must be a hearing protection 1, and the action level is 85 decibels or above. So at this action level, every employee exposed to that noise is required to wear ear protection. So the next thing we'll talk about is noise frequency. So noise frequency is referred to as the pitch of the sound. So, and it's measured in hertz. Practically, human ear can hear between 20 to 20,000 hertz. Okay, and measured sound we have in the industries and in the workplace is between 1,000 to 5,000 hertz. So that means if the sound is above this between 20 to 20,000 hertz, then we should be expecting hearing loss or maybe hearing damage. Okay, so hearing loss is what imparts your ability to hear high frequency sounds. For example, if you are able to hear some of your mobile phone ring, or you're able to hear beeps in the car parked, if this is not able to, your ear is not able to catch some of these frequencies, then your hearing loss has started at that time. Let's look at noise exposure. Continuous exposure to high level of noise is more damaging than intermittent exposure. What this simply means is that if the worker or the person is being exposed to noise continuously every day, there is high risk or high possibility of getting a ear damage than somebody that gets exposed to a high level of noise at intermediate level, that's with gaps, because there is opportunity for him to have rest period and the ear nerves to have relaxed before the next exposure. So short exposures also that are having extreme high level of noise can also be very dangerous, can also result to hearing loss. So we should be aware, we should know the level of noise in every workplace that we are working at, or near the equipment that we are exposed to. That will be very, very important. Now, what do we now mean that by hearing conservation program? So according to OSHA, if any work environment produces a noise that is above 85 decibel in every 8-hour period that the employee is exposed, then he's required to establish a hearing conservation program. And that hearing conservation program should contain identification of high noise areas within that workplace or within the facility. Also, it should provide the workers in those areas hearing protection. The workers' hearing level must be monitored. with a baseline audiogram and annual hearing test. So annually, there should be a hearing test for those workers exposed to those level of noise. Employees should be given access to these hearing tests. So when you do this hearing test annually, the OSHA requires that the employers should make this test known to the employees so that they will be aware when they are having an increasing hearing noise. There should be ongoing training and education on hearing protection given to the workers. So this is the components of hearing conservation program as mandated by OSHA for all workplaces that produces a noise above 85 decibel. Now, having known that, let's look at noise reduction. Noise reduction is part of a hearing conservation program where employers are required or are mandated to correct the noise from the source by engineering the controls where visible. For example, installing mufflers or installing acoustic barriers. These are engineering control measures that are recommended to be implemented first as a noise reduction mechanism. And where these are not practicable, then noise reduction should be reduced by use of hearing protection equipment, such as ear muffs and ear plugs. Now let's look at some of the what is known as noise reduction rating. Noise reduction rating, or NRR, is the effectiveness of a hearing protection device to reduce the noise at a particular level. Okay, the NRR measures the approximate number of decibel that the device reduces. So every manufacturer is required to test their product and assign them an NRR. So after producing ear muffs or ear plugs, you are supposed to state that this is the NRR for this product. That means this is the rating or the how many times that this product can reduce the noise entered into a worker's ear. So before purchasing any ear protection equipment, we should ensure that we know what is the minimum NRR for that product and what is required for our workplace. Now, for ear plugs and ear muffs, the value or the noise reduction rating for ear plug and ear muffs is stated in each of the products. Now, for ear plug, the maximum that you can get is 33 decibels, while for ear muffs, the maximum you can get is 31 decibel. But when you use both ear plugs and ear muffs together, you will get a total noise reduction rate of 36 decibel. Now, we know what is ear muffs. Ear muff covers the entire ear, and most times it blocks the noise by covering your entire ear and not allowing the noise to go in. But there are some limitations based on the other PPEs used or based on the features, maybe beard people or somebody using glasses. So it could lead to some limitations on the level of noise that ear muffs can provide. That is why ear plugs has higher NRR, because it fits inside the ear canal, and that can help to prevent higher level of noise from entering inside the ear. That is why generally ear plugs have a higher NRR. So let's look at the best approach. In general, ear plugs give greater protection because they fit better inside the ear canal, and other PPEs cannot affect its fitting. So, but it's recommended that you can wear both of them. It's recommended that you can wear both ear plugs and ear muffs to provide higher level of hearing protection. So it is the job of the employer to provide these ear protections, but it's also the job of the employee to ensure that he uses it correctly, and he uses it all the time to ensure that the hearing protection program or hearing conservation program is well achieved. All right, so this is the few I'll be sharing for now, and I'll end here to give room for others to share their thoughts. Thank you for your time.
Yes, can I chip in? Uh,
Yeah.
are you with me? Yeah. Okay. Um, just to add to what you have stated so far, um, based on the workplace hearing conservation program, like from the definition you said, it's a program. From our own perspective now, it's like a program that is aimed to protect workers' hearing and also prevent hearing loss, you know. So such kind of program within the site should be able to outline some essential measures, you know, and procedure to ensure that to ensure a kind of safe and healthy work environment. You know, it's not about the people now. It's all about the environment, because the environment, it is what is being generated from the environment that ends up affecting the individuals who work within such an environment. So that's a very vital point we should put into consideration. So by going forward, we need to look at also the importance of hearing protection. You know, it's not about just designing a program or having a program in place, but we need to understand what is the importance of doing such program. You know, because in some cases, when we find ourselves in an organization where some things are not working, and as a specialist or as an expert, you decide to bring your ideas into towards the management. How do we convince them? Because I would just say some of the management are novice. They don't know the implication of some of these things because they are not exposed to that level of hours of noise to be able to have such an effect on them. So we need to convince them. We need to know how important it is, you know, for the workforce, um, by giving them a convincing statement, you know, why such programs should be implemented. Because if you want to implement such program in one way or the other, it requires some form of resources, you know. So it could be financial, it could be time taking to train the workers and engage them in one or two things. So, and you know, some organizations will just feel, oh, you are taking part of the workers' time, production time, and all that. So basically, we have to convince them that hearing protection is essential in preventing loss, which can lead to difficulty in communication. And this can also lead to what we call social isolation, and it can also reduce the quality of life of an individual. If that happens, we know what in turn it will be on production, you know, within the organization. And hearing loss can negatively impact the concentration of workers. You know, when a workers are not concentrated, especially when you talk about those who work in the process industry, those who work using equipment, we know what such an implication is. That when you are not concentrated, you are not you lack concentration towards your work, we know the implication. And also this hearing, one of the importance again is that it enhances proper communication, because if there is poor hearing protection or things like that within the workplace, we know how that can affect your communication with workers. You can imagine a workers who have hearing problem, you know, it will have a difficulty to communicate with such workers. And also it is important that part of this program that it enhance workers' performance, because when there's a hearing issue, this will affect the performance of the worker as well. So protecting hearing support focus on mostly on productivity. And apart from that, another important is that it improves safety. You know, because the ability for you to hear warning signals and to communicate clearly, which is very vital for safety, is very, very important. Because if you are passing a message, you are communicating a message to the workers, and this worker is having a difficulty, in hearing you, it means your communication is then a one-way communication. So communication has to be two-way. You understand? The person who is receiving it should be able to hear properly so that he can be able to process and understand what you have sent, and for him to either act by replicating on the other side. So basically, that's the importance from my own point. And another point I would like to emphasize is like, when you're designing a program within the site, we need to talk about an assessment, especially in an industry or in a work site or environment where we know that noise are being generated. We need to look at noise exposure assessment. And how do we do that? Because such things need to be incorporated into such program. Okay, so that for us to be able to monitor noise on a regular basis, and one of those things they use is like a sound level meter, which helps to identify areas with excessive noise exposure within such a work environment. And also, it is very important that within the same program, we do a kind of analysis of data, whereby all the data that are collected from monitoring the environment and all that, and workers' exposure are well identified, and so that we can be able to say, okay, this group of people who work in this particular area, unit, department, or whatever, are highly exposed. So that those data will be able to make us know how to improve the prevention of protecting workers. Just like when you are taking the HSE statistics on the site now, maybe the lost time and sick absence, things and all those stuff. So all those things will be able to guide you. All those data are very, very important to be able to guide us that, okay, is this program that we are designing, is it working effectively or not? So the data is very important. We cannot just design a program without looking at the data, because when we fail to look at the data, we will not know if we are progressing or not. And most importantly, we cannot rule out the risk assessment, which is a foundation for anything we do in safety, because we have to evaluate the potential of hearing damage based on noise exposure levels, on different kind of activity that is happening within the site, and so that one can be able to identify the high-risk area or tasks, that is exposing such workers or individual to such. Now, looking at, let's just look at the engineering control aspect of it. What I've said so far, Mr. Johnson might have said one or two things, but to be more focused, when we look at how we can prevent it, when we talk about the hierarchy of control, sometimes some people say, okay, eliminate. You can eliminate it completely if it is possible, but if it's not possible, then you begin to look at some engineering control means, like how can you reduce the noise level? We have to try to implement, a noise reducing equipment, for the workers, or enclosure, or probably to minimize the materials, that are being used, from the source where this noise are being generated. So when we do that, at that point, we are deploying an engineering control, and also in some cases, like in the process industry, we need to do what we call process optimization, whereby you modify some work processes or procedure in order to reduce the level of noise, such as optimizing machinery and use of tools that are not, or let's say, quiet tools. Okay, so equipment maintenance is also very, very important. For those who work in heavy industry, we understand the implication of routine preventive maintenance, because if an equipment is not properly maintained, that could also generate some level of noise within either the operator or other workers within the environment. So I think that should settle that of engineering control. Then when we look at all the administrative aspect of it, there we could be talking about work rotation, rotating worker through noisy area to minimize their exposure or their high exposure level to noise. And secondly, we have to talk about work scheduling. You have to schedule, when you have workers working in a noisy environment, you have a kind of doing this kind of work scheduling that can reduce the hours, minimize the disturbance and potential for exposure, and also look at how to provide a designated quiet area for break, because they should have a frequent break. You cannot expect somebody who work 8 hours work and only less rest for 1 hour or something like that. Just like as Mr. Johnson has said, somebody who will work in an intense, noisy area, but he normally comes there once in a while, intermittently like that, cannot be highly exposed to somebody who just work for a stretch 8 hours, probably just have just 1 hour break. So there should be a kind of frequent, break and all that, so that the person can get a balance as well. So there's what we call signaling system, which use a kind of visual signal or alternative communication method to reduce reliance on auditory cue. Sometimes that you have to, some places you have to communicate, yes, and that place might be generating noise as well. So you try to use all those signaling system to do a means of communication among the workers. And as we all know, and as Mr. Johnson have said, PPE, which is the last result, it's very, very important that we deploy the use of earmuffs, which cover the entire ear and block out external sound. Okay, and we also have the earplugs. And this, like he has said, it is inserted into the ear canal to also reduce the level of noise. And he has given us the figure and the level of noise reduction they can probably prevent. So if we are taking away 30 something out of 85 or above 85, we know how important that is to the workers. And also there are some level of customized model air plug that are probably made in order to fit an individual shape, in order to have this maximum comfort and noise reduction. And also we look at the testing. When you design a program, it's not about the program. How did you test the workers? How do we test our employee, in order to determine if they have hearing problem or not? So there's what we call the baseline testing, which involve conducting an initial hearing test to establish a baseline for probably future comparison. Okay, so because when you are designing a program, you have to test the worker. It's like a baseline testing. So when you test them, you'll be able to know, okay, this is the level they are in terms of their auditory or hearing level. So you increase by doing some kind of periodic, maybe it could be like 3 months, 6 monthly, or maybe every year or things like that, depending on the kind of activity that is happening within the site. And while you do the periodic testing, you have to monitor alongside. And the third level, you have to do a kind of follow-up testing, like a follow-up test, in order to determine or detect if there's any severity or potential cause, if anything has happened within those periods. And lastly, I want to emphasize on training and education, because it is very, very important that we implement hearing and awareness for hearing loss prevention. Okay, in this aspect, we're going to educate workers about the risks of noise exposure and also the importance of hearing protection, because all these things are very important. Because I believe when you lack the knowledge, the understanding of the implication of what, because we've seen this in the middle, some workers, the way they react, the way they behave, the way they do things is because they don't have this knowledge, they don't have this understanding, they don't have this education. Because you cannot tell me that if I jump from this place, I'm going to die. And you see me, I'll still insist that I will jump. So those kind of things are very important. We need to expose them. And how do we expose them? We give them this education and training, let them know the risks that are involved, let them know how to use the PPE, let them know how to maintain the PPE as well. And also we need to deploy some kind of communicating strategies, in order to effectively communicate in a noisy environment, because it's very, very understandable that some workplaces are noisy. So in such cases, you put out a kind of measure that can prevent that noise from affecting those workers or individual. So, and in that case, how do we communicate? So we need to deploy a kind of techniques, in order, like when I was saying about something about non-verbal cue and all that, it could be like a form of sign. So we could use this to communicate to workers, to interpret maybe when there's a danger and things like that. So all these things should be incorporated into such hearing conservation program. And also we need to also look at reporting procedure, how to inform worker about procedure in reporting any concern or suspected hearing loss, and we need to tell them the sign. We need to educate them about the sign or the sign and symptoms, so that when they begin to feel things like that, they will be able to understand that, oh, probably there's likely to be a problem, so they can be able to report such things appropriately. I would just thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to make this contribution. I would like to stop here so that others will have an opportunity to say one or two things. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stephen. Thank you for that wonderful contribution.
You're welcome.
So we give room for others to contribute.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Mr. Johnson.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure that I'm being heard.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and also excellent contribution by the second speaker. You both did a very good job to the topic under discussion. Hearing conservation, as per the industry that all of us work in, actually starts from the design level of every project. During the engineering stage of the project, from there, hazard identification is carried out. And through that study, areas that present high noise during construction stage are easily identified, and measures are put into place to control the noise that are associated with such areas. And I'll give a few examples. For instance, in a project that involves fabrication and yard, definitely there's going to be sandblasting and painting. And one of the most noisy activity on site is sandblasting. So when you have this kind of activity as part of the activities for the project, then you begin to look at having a purpose-built sandblasting area that is soundproof enclosure, which is isolated from other personnel. Only personnel that are directly involved in that activity, that is sandblasters, are allowed to go in there. And of course, before they go in during the activities, they will need to wear the appropriate PPE, as you have rightly mentioned. Then also the equipment that will be used on that site, both during the construction stage and the operational stage. At that stage, such equipment has also been identified. The last speaker was very right to mention that noise reducing equipment are strongly advised for such purposes. And the ones that easily come to mind are soundproof air compressors and power generators during construction stage. Therefore, operation stage, in places like pump houses, these are purely high noise areas. And one of the first control is to place a very bold sign outside the building, informing anybody that is coming close to that area that this is a high noise area. So if you are not wearing a noise reduction equipment or PPE, you are not allowed to come in here. So those are the few contributions I want to make in the area of site work. Then, away from site to our individual secular life, when we are talking about noise reduction, our mind is always on the site situation. What of when we are at home? We may take all the precautions at work because there are procedures for these precautions to be taken, and the procedures are effectively followed. But when we come back to our individual homes, most of us do not follow those precautions anymore. Even if we do on our own, what of the cost of interacting with other members of the society? And I'll give you a few examples. For instance, there is what we call temporary happens momentarily. It could take some second or a minute or two, and your hearing capacity will be back to normal. Then the permanent hearing loss is the type that cannot be revised. Once it happened, it has happened, and you have to deal with it for the rest of your life because there's no treatment for hearing loss. First, let me talk about the temporary hearing loss. When one is exposed to sudden noise from nowhere, you were not anticipating it, and suddenly it happens. Because of the high noise level, measured in decibel, like the presenter actually spoke about at the first presentation, momentarily you lose your hearing loss, you lose your hearing capacity. Then after some seconds, hardly more than a minute, gradually your hearing capacity will begin to reinstall. It adjusts itself back to normal again. That is one. Then secondly, I do not know how many of you that have flown in a fixed-wing propeller aircraft. When it is at high level flying, you do not feel anything. But once it starts descending to land, you begin to feel some sharp piercing pains in your ears. The pain is so severe that you cannot ignore it. And it happens to so many people. It's not because anything is wrong with your system. And the reason why this happens is that it's because of a sudden pressure differential. When the aircraft is flying at a high level, maybe 4,000, 5,000 feet, the pressure at that level is low. And once it begins the landing process, it is moving from area of low pressure to area of high pressure, which is at the ground level. And so the difference between these two levels is the one that results in that sharp pain that people hear in their ears. And it can be very, very discomforting. And what happens in most cases is that for a very severe case, even when the aircraft has landed and you have disembarked, for the first few seconds after you have disembarked, you just see people opening their mouth and talking, but you will not hear what they are saying. Then after some time, gradually, like I said earlier on, the ear system will begin to reset itself again. Then you begin to hear what people are saying. But it is there and it is always there. And one of the ways to overcome this or to prevent it is that if you know you are flying a fixed-wing aircraft, it is a very good idea to have something like a peppermint, treble, or chewing gum in your mouth, something that will make your mouth to be moving while the aircraft is landing. Once you are doing that, it expands and contracts the muscles of the ear. And once that is happening, the pressure buildup within your ear will not have that chance to accumulate to the extent of causing the person partial deafness. This is a practical reality. I have experienced it personally several times. Then another aspect of our social life is when we find ourselves in our various places of worship or when we attend social gatherings. I have a very good friend. He became deaf on his left ear on the day of his marriage. What happened? He was sitting very close to the loudspeakers of this musician. And this musician set his music equipment volume at a very high volume. So his left ear was impacted. Till tomorrow, he couldn't regain hearing from that ear. He's only using the right-hand side ear. Then also, when we attend our places of worship, especially for those of us that worship in Pentecostal fellowships, we believe in loud music because we are making a joyful noise. We are making joyful noise to the Lord. And so if one finds itself very close to the loudspeakers of the church equipment, it is a very good idea to move away. because these people that are doing the sound production of these places of worship, they don't have knowledge of what you are discussing here now. The one is that the sound is loud and people are able to hear it and dance very well. And because the church building in a situation like that, it sounds like an enclosure because the music, the sound wave do not have chance to go outside the building. It's wall round with doors and windows. It's of flamboyant places. Those places are even air conditioned. So the windows are closed, the doors are closed. And so when high noise is coming from the musical equipment, the sound is circulating within the building and it passes the hearing abilities of worshippers. Most people do not know. And they will not know this until they will go for an audiometric test. When they go for an audiometric test, that is where they will know that, they have an impaired hearing. So these are some of the areas we need to look at in our social life. There are some other noisy places, but these are prominent examples that I feel like sharing with us. And like the first presenter mentioned, it is always a good idea to go for a periodical audiometric test. You could do it once in a year, twice in a year, but at least do it so that you will be sure of your hearing status. So many people for large projects, so many people are mobilized for different roles. And if you are someone that is in a position of giving a HSE induction to new employees or visitors, and because you do not know the hearing capacity of these people, you don't know whether there is any of them that is partially deaf. So it is advisable that when you are giving safety induction or any other form of training, raise your voice, not to make people deaf, but raise your voice at high level so that both those that are partially deaf and those that are not partially deaf can adequately hear you. There are some people that have impaired hearing loss, impaired hearing. When you are doing a training presentation for them, because you are speaking at a very low volume, which most of the time they cannot catch, they will not be able to tell you that they are not hearing you because they have a hearing impairment. They will just be looking at you. So it's also a good idea when you are doing your training, either induction or any form of a training, once in a while, ask a question, point to different individuals. May not be a difficult question to answer, but just to be sure that the people are following and understanding what you are saying. So these are the few contributions I feel like making. Once again, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. That is not a small contribution, it's a huge contribution.
Thank you.
And your ability to take us a bit away from the workplace is very spectacular. So thank you for that wonderful contribution.
You're welcome.
A practical one indeed.
Yeah. So we still have a few minutes. Is there someone else I want to continue?
Hello, sir.
Yes, Amojede, go ahead. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, I really want to appreciate the contribution so far. I want to appreciate you guys, the organizers, for all you did for the program. Now, I just want to add on to what the last speakers talked about. Spirituality is something that most people, they always want to talk about. They only want to tell you that, yes, they're spiritual, make them feel that
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. You are audible.
No, I cannot hear the speaker, but I heard you, so
yes. Amojede, we can hear you. See if you are muted. You are not muted. Check if you are talking. Check your speaker.
Anyway, maybe it might be network from his side. But if I want to believe what he was trying to say, You know, when it comes to religious gathering, you know, the part of the world we come from, especially those of us in Africa, we have different mentality. There are ways we look at things and see things, you know. So, but be that as it may, the truth is that even if you want to go spiritual, look at things, and at the same time, whatever we have today are being created by God. You know, we cannot say because there is God, you are sick, you will not go to the hospital. So there are so many things we could combine. And if you look in the developed countries, okay, there is when you talk about the event management company, they do have safety departments. Okay, so you know, from the lighting, from the erecting of the stage down to the sound and all those stuff. So there are it's a safety department work in collaboration with all those areas to ensure all these things we are talking about. It's just that we are from a part of the world whereby people don't value safety. It's unfortunate. That is why even in the place that you need them most, people feel it is not relevant. And all these things has to do with legislation anyway, you understand. So even at some point, I think is in Lagos in Nigeria or something like that, there are places you don't even use loudspeaker, because if you exceed a certain level of noise, you are going to be fine. So all those things, because it is not by the number of noise that will take us to meet our God. So, but I think from this specialist area, that is why we are there as a professional. We could be able to advise, counsel, and share our own opinion. You know, I think that's what I have to say on that.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Steven, for that wonderful introduction. Do you have any other contribution before we call it a day? I really appreciate all the contributors so far. You are all wonderful. Do we have more contribution? Okay, maybe we have touched all the areas of the topic. So that is why others don't want to keep repeating the same thing we have said already.
Sorry, I remember something, sorry. Which I was thinking the last speaker would say it, but maybe it's probably skip his mind anyway. Yes, when we talk about our individual life, the way we live our life, the way we practice, I know this one is common to everybody. One way or the other, we might have come across it. When we talk about using hands-free, on the earphone, what we talk about, because since the invention of the growth of the use of mobile phone and all that, all these electronic devices and all that, we find out that it is easier for us to just, somebody who go to a party or go to a worship center can just do that maybe like once in a week. But for most people on a daily basis, you see them using earphones, different form of hands-free to either listening to music and all that. And to an extent that you see most of them will increase the volume. So from our respective home, outside work, these are things we should be able to encourage our family members, our friends within the community, let them understand the implication. It is not only in the work site, people could have hearing problem. Just like an example you gave, I think if my wife's friend, husband has similar issue also, in fact, she went to a party, same example he gave. In fact, this one, he lost his hearing completely from both ears. So we could immediately the sound just came. He was sitting beside this, you know, these big speakers and all that. So, you know, individuals are different. There's a sound I can hear that my ear can be able to absorb it. For another person, the person will just go deaf immediately. So, or partially. So we should be able to preach this, within our community, within our homes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Who are saying you are raising your hand? Go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. I just wanted to confirm, is the recording, will the recording be available?
Yes, it will be available. I hope I have your contact, right?
Yes, because I actually don't want to bring us back. I missed the area where the other speaker was talking about the personal lifestyle, and he was talking about eating chewing gum. There was an illustration he gave there that I didn't get that clearly because I left my phone somewhere. So, and I don't want it to bring us back. That is why I'm requesting, so I can just go back to the video and listen to it again.
Yeah, sure. I will share the video with you. Just make sure you send me a message in case you didn't get it after 1 hour. So that's
okay.
a very practical experience that he shared there.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've touched all the angles, so that is why we are not having much further comments. So I'm also very overwhelmed, and thank you all for your weight of knowledge that you've shared with us. It's really, really appreciated. We appreciate this opportunity to learn from each other. So people might not understand how far we are going with this, but whatever you hear here, no matter how unprepared you are, you must grab one or two things. So I appreciate everyone for coming, and thank you for your time. So next week, Thursday, we'll have another session. So just keep your time ready.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Mike, you're always on time. I hope your time is not, the time difference is not much from your location. We appreciate, even though you are far away from Qatar, you still join every week. So thank you guys for coming. And next week we'll have another session. Do have a blessed night.
Thank you.
So when I
All
see
right,
the
thank you. Good
videos on the YouTube link, do well to subscribe to that channel so that you will always get alert and notification. Thank you.
All right. Good night.